just came from a briefing before our HHS Committee on Food Security Strategic Plan, which the Council has received from the Executive Branch. It was an initiative of mine to create such a food security plan. We have 78,000 people in Montgomery County who don't necessarily know where their next meal is coming from, and the highest number of children in the entire state. So this is a serious issue and one that our county is taking seriously. We have a number of target populations that we need to get to, children, for example. We have what's called in some circles a Smart Sacks program, a weekend food program at our school system. The success of that program really depends on the extent to which MCPS has people at their end that are ready to deal with this program, because it's not something that MCPS does on a day-to-day basis. So you have to have a guidance counselor or somebody like that in the school system that's ready to coordinate with our nonprofit community like MANA and others who do this work. So those are the kinds of discrete things we need to focus on in order to make some improvements. Seniors are obviously another audience that is very vulnerable. They're vulnerable because they're isolated, because their transportation issues are difficult, and because of human issues like pride, that sometimes they just simply say, I don't need this service. And now you have the threat of SNAP programs and federal programs being cut, so it is an issue that we are going to have to monitor on an ongoing basis. But I feel like we got a very good comprehensive report from our executive branch and nonprofits who work very hard on it, so I'm pleased with respect to that. Since I saw you last, I was in Annapolis, which is always such a fun thing, and testified with respect to the Trust Act. As I shared with you, our council feels very strongly that the way in which we do our business in Montgomery County is the right way. It's a balanced way, one that protects both public safety and holds our community together. And so at really the request of my colleagues and myself, we asked our county attorney to come up with amendments to that bill that would conform the state approach to how we do our business in Montgomery County, and I presented those amendments and testimony to the Judiciary Committee last week. I don't have an update for you as to where that stands. All I know is that we tried to do our best to be a constructive player in this dialogue. It is obviously a very important issue for our community in particular, and given that it was sponsored by all but one of our delegates, we all felt that we needed to play a constructive role in this conversation, and that's why we proposed amendments to them that would comport with how we do our business in Montgomery. On Friday morning, I joined with our federal, state, and county executive in a program that was really very, very well done, that the county executive initiated with the Jewish Community Relations Council with respect to the rise in hate crimes, obviously particularly the bomb threats that were delivered in Montgomery County and across the country. And it was a remarkable event, in part because of all the faith community solidarity with the Jewish community. Every faith organization was represented from throughout the region. And so when we went on stage, there were probably 50, 60 representatives of different faiths saying, we stand in solidarity with the Jewish community. And of course, the Jewish community stands in solidarity with the Muslim community and every other community, because what happens, of course, when you start marginalizing any group, when you start denigrating any group, it just spreads. The Jewish community has felt this obviously most acutely, as it has throughout history. But once you let the genie out of the bottle, as was done in the presidential campaign, you can see how difficult it is to put it back. Once you start stirring people's basest fears, they take root. And so there's just no question that there is a correlation between the words that were spoken and during the campaign and the consequences throughout the country. But we felt it here as well, and it was a terrific program put together by the county executive and JCRC. I tip my hat to the county executive for making sure it happened. I believe the county executive is going to be sending over a supplemental appropriation request to address some of the security issues in the Jewish community. I spoke with him immediately after he made that announcement to see what plans would be made for the Muslim community, which was also targeted in Silver Spring. And his response was that the reason why this piece is moving ahead first is because the Jewish community has traditionally asked for grant funds with respect to this, and had asked for grant funds with respect to these issues this year, and so it was easy to accelerate it. That had not been the case with the Muslim community previously, and therefore it would trail, if you will, a little, but that he was certainly looking into that, and I would certainly expect him to do so and urge him to do so, so that any faith group that is targeted receives the kinds of protection and support that they should in Montgomery County. We have this small little Bethesda plan that the Fed committee is dealing with, and of course it is both an exciting plan and a difficult plan. It's an exciting plan because I believe at the end of the day we will actually make Bethesda a better place across the board, a place that's greener, that has more parks, that has lovelier buildings, a more enlivened streetscape, a better place to be. People who live there today, of course, are apprehensive about it and are asking, how is the quality of my life going to be impacted? What are we doing on schools? What are we doing on transportation? What are we doing on parks? And all those issues, I hope that we will come up with satisfactory answers to. The parks issue is one that is particularly important and one in which we have county assets. And my mantra has been that we need to bring our county assets to bear on behalf of our community. So that includes our parking lots, and it also includes what we have today at the Regional Service Center in Bethesda, which is basically a 3-story building and a place where there are 290-foot buildings planned, and this is our asset, and it is a totally underutilized asset. And I'm not talking about underutilized, we've got a daycare center there now that's lovely, and it isn't to say that that's not lovely. It is, instead of 3 stories, we should have 20 stories there. We should have a recreation center there. We might even have a civic center there. We could have a kid museum there. We could have senior housing there. We could have affordable housing there. We can build up. And so it is something that, from my perspective, we need to maximize our county assets on behalf of our county residents. And so working real hard to make that happen. Met with David Dice, and David said, Council President, for me to do this, I need $30,000 worth of funds in order to make sure that the garage, which this all sits on, can accommodate a larger building. He feels like it can, but he needs to have the engineering so that when you put out an RFP, you can say to people, this can support a public-private partnership of X stories, and so come in and tell us what you'd be prepared to do. So that's the kind of thing that I hope we will do that will give the people of Bethesda greater access to, people in Bethesda are now jealous of Silver Spring, right? That used to be the case, but it is today, that we're jealous of what happens in Silver Spring in terms of community spaces and the Silver Spring Civic Center and things of that nature, which we don't have in Bethesda. And so there's a great yearning for more, and more is warranted. We need more recreation centers in Bethesda. We need more parks in Bethesda. We need to find the ways to bring those about. The park fee and things of that nature are things that we're still trying to get our minds around as to what the best means is to bring about parks. There's concern that the park fee at $10 a square foot actually won't kick in, except for people like Marriott, until years down the road. And so that would be, you'd get $4 million when you need 30, 40, 50, $60 million. How are we going to get these parks in place? And so people are talking about other funding mechanisms that could ensure that we could not only get the dollars, but perhaps bond them and therefore create greater opportunities because we'd have an assured revenue stream with respect to it. So these are things that the committee is still dealing with and trying to get the heights right. There's, of course, it's very difficult in Bethesda to make everybody happy because the residential neighborhoods really come right up next to Wisconsin Avenue 355, and therefore how can you both have a vibrant 355 and Wisconsin Avenue and take care of your residential neighborhoods that are right next to it? So threading that needle is not easy, but I think we are, with a couple exceptions, on the path to doing that. What else do we have, guys? We have an M83 status update. That is that we received from the Department of Transportation their supplemental report on the Mid-County Corridor, M83, which has historically been one of the more controversial proposed roads in our county. The analysis was done to see whether or not BRT on that portion of our county would obviate the need for an M83. It appears that that's not the case, that they serve distinct markets. And we have Dr. Orland's own proposal, which is instead of having a 4-lane road, to have a 2-lane road that would be reversible. So it's a very peak-intensive corridor, so that what would 2 lanes do as opposed to 4 lanes? And could you have sort of a parkway as opposed to 4 lanes that would be more environmentally destructive? All those things now need to be considered by our planners. I will be recommending in a memorandum to my colleagues today that we ask our planners to do a master plan process that would basically come back to us in the form of a recommendation as to whether or not we keep this proposed highway in our master plans or we take it out. I think at last count, a majority of my colleagues were not predisposed to M83. The county executive has not sought any funding with respect to this corridor. But now the question will be, are we at a place in our county's history where we can make a judgment on this highway? Should it stay in our master plan or should it be taken out? Well, that's quite frankly what we have the planning board for and planners to do. And so I'm going to ask them to do that analysis in the first instance, send it to us, and then we will take that matter up when we get it. What else do we have, gang? This afternoon, I'm pleased that the Fed Committee is taking up a micro loan program that I have proposed, a program that's designed particularly for our immigrant communities and other people who have not had access to traditional sources of capital. The program basically would fund nonprofits who do this work and do it beautifully, nonprofits that literally give to homeless people and have a 98% repayment rate. Okay, these are people that really do this work so well and make sure that people who are entrepreneurs in spirit, entrepreneurs in instinct, and all they lack is a little capital in order to get a truck, in order to do home construction work, or a sewing machine in order to be a seamstress. Just a small amount of dollars that can make a huge difference in people's lives. And so I'm pleased the Fed Committee will be taking that up today. In addition, the Fed Committee will be taking up what we've called a Community Zoning and Land Use Resource Officer legislation. It's basically legislation that is designed to help communities. Look at what's happened in the Bethesda plan. How many neighborhoods just are involved but really need to have a grounding in this very arcane world of zoning. And so in the past, we had people that were actually advocates for communities. And we had trouble with that concept because we said, who's the community? Who are we allowing our county to, quote, advocate for? And so instead of getting hung up on that issue, I thought that if we just created a position that would provide information, be a resource to the community, help them understand our land use arcane world, that they would be better positioned to participate and better positioned to be advocates for themselves if they start with a base of knowledge and information that they otherwise would not have. Is there anything? I think that's...
BRT meeting on Thursday.
Yes, BRT and CCT meeting where we're basically hearing from our state as to what the status is with respect to that and trying to nudge them along, which is what we do.
What seems to be the
Why
hold-up?
don't I open up to you guys?
Sorry, I thought you had already done, excuse me. What seems to be the hold-up with regard to BRT and CCC? Yeah, so.
Although the governor did put money back in for the CCT at the tail end. So now it's really scheduling. We are assuming the responsibility for BRT design now from the state. But we need to be coordinating with case with respect to the 355. Is it in the center? Is it on the side? What do people have strong views with respect to? So it is something that we need to have ongoing conversation with. But now our county is stepping up and assuming the responsibility. Before, the state had done the work with respect to BRT, and that really wasn't all that satisfying. And we feel like we can do a better job and a faster job. And that's certainly the goal, is to get this to a place where we can move forward with it faster than otherwise, particularly on 355.
If the delays for the state planning were funding, you mentioned a little bit from the governor, but what else is different at this point?
That's it. Again, this is an ongoing dialogue, so I don't want to overstate what's quote different, as much as it is an ongoing dialogue with the state and with our partners to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Would the county be considering mixed traffic as an option overall?
We have already done our master plan for BRT.
Oh.
Can you talk about the status of the Green Bay?
I don't have an update with respect to that. I understand that the board of directors had been selected and people are pretty pleased about it and feel like we are ready to pop. We should be getting, I believe, we may have gotten the supplemental appropriation for, thank you for asking, for the Green Bank as part of the ill-advised settlement with Exelon and Pepco. We were able to exact a chunk of change from Exelon, which is used to fund the Green Bank. It's something on the order of $18 million that is now going to be available for the Green Bank, and hopefully that the combination of that plus our commercial PACE program, which is already underway and which has already been implemented, those are the types of programs that we can now move into the Green Bank. So real pleased that they are now poised to move forward with dollars behind them.
In terms of the funding for protection for synagogues and community centers, have you gotten a dollar amount yet?
I have not seen the dollar amount yet, so no, the answer is no. It is, I am sure that we can get that for you because it is my understanding that the Jewish community had requested in the form of grant applications. So I bet we can track it down for you because I think that's what they're acting upon.
What does it mean? Does it mean police? Does it mean security?
Cameras, things of that nature.
Okay. Just cameras? Like
No, things of that nature. I apologize. Off the top of my head, I don't recall. There were 3 categories that the county executive gave voice to in this moment.
Can you explain why you said the Jewish community has been asking it for a long time, so they're ahead of the Muslim community? Can you explain what's the barriers between the Muslim community getting this type of appropriation?
Well, again, the Jewish community has faced these kinds of threats, unfortunately, for a longer period of time. And so it has been part and parcel of their asks of county government for financial assistance and meeting these security needs. The Muslim community, up until recently, had not faced that situation, therefore had never come to the county and said, will you help us in this particular way? So that's why there's a difference. And so now I believe there'll be communications with the Muslim community, particularly, say, what are those needs.
Has the county ever had to do something like this before in our history where police have been asked to, I know they're talking about, and they said Friday, they'll be doing extra patrols. Have they had to come forward with this kind of grant money to assist with security in the past?
Yes, the Jewish community in particular has felt the need for this for some period of time and has knocked on our door for some period of time with respect to this.
Was there anyone that you can point to, or?
I am sure that there have been, but in this moment I can't.
The microloan program that you're considering, is it targeted at members of the community who doesn't have, say, for example, the paperwork to go to traditional lenders?
Exactly, that is the whole point of the microloan program. Mr. Hucker is sitting here, is one of the lead co-sponsors of it. Ms. Navarro, Mr. Hucker, and I met in Silver Spring a number of occasions to talk to people. What are their needs? How do they get, how can we help them? And they all said, well, I go into a bank, really? What do you think the bank says to me? They say goodbye, okay? Because they don't have credit scores that are worthy of a bank loan. But these nonprofits have found a way to work with people in a manner that they are very credit worthy. So in one instance, we have this provider from the District of Columbia, Life Assets, a nonprofit, who creates a context in which if gives you a loan, there'll be 4 people that are part of a cohort with you that also got loans. And if you do not repay your loan, none of the other people are eligible for another loan. So you have accountability, social responsibility, social accountability in a way that is different than your financial accountability. And it's actually more compelling because you want to help each other. You're all doing this together. So those are the kinds of ways in which people become committed and are, in fact, credit worthy at the end of the day.
And do we know where the money is coming from?
Well, hopefully the money will come from our county council. I still don't know if the county executive is going to include it in his budget. We have asked for $500,000 for this program to start out with. Again, that will not be run by the county. The county will, if you will, put out an RFP asking these nonprofits to come before us and show us their expertise, and then we give them the money and say, go forth and do good work.
To go back to the idea of safety, what have you heard from constituents or residents with regard to people feeling safe in schools, going to school?
Now, are we talking
like
about
for-
hate crimes? Are we talking, I'm sorry, so are we talking about the immigrant community? What are we talking about
A
here?
combination of the lens too. So hate crime as well as the immigrant community, just students feeling safe in the schools that they attend.
Well, I think it's fair to say that the level of anxiety in our community as a whole is off the charts. Okay? Imagine, and you're all sophisticated players and follow the media, I hope. You saw the situation where a father was driving his daughter and wife to a school, was driving his daughter to school, and he was pulled over and handcuffed and taken away. Okay? He'd been in the country 25 years. He'd had one DUI about 10 years ago. And he is in handcuffs and is going to be deported. His children and wife are crying. I mean, how traumatic is this? Okay? So, do you think people are apprehensive? Every day. We met again with our county executives people, and people aren't showing up for food because they're nervous that they will get apprehended. So we do think school is a safe place. We met with Jack Smith, and he indicated that he feels like kids know that school is a safe place. But obviously for the Jewish community, if you have bomb threats, okay, that's exactly, makes you wonder whether you have a safe place. So parents are just really very upset, and children have to be nervous. So there are conversations taking place at schools throughout the country now that basically have never taken place before. Do you know, are your parents living here, are they documented or not? And if they're not, okay, do you have a place to go if your parents get taken away? These are the conversations that are taking place throughout the country.
What about hate crime or just discrimination, bullying in general, not related to documentation? So like somebody's race or ethnicity?
Well, you see white powers, graffiti going up in places. You see the ugly side of America that has been exposed. Okay? We thought we were better than this. And we're seeing that there's a great swath that are not. I've shared my views before. I do believe the president must be held accountable for what we are seeing today. And for those of us, I was the first elected official in Montgomery County to endorse Barack Obama for president. To have seen the tweets this week from the president talking about President Obama and the way in which he did, I think many in the community are really wondering as to the president's mental stability. This is serious, and people are talking about it. And how frightening is it to have to wonder about whether or not your president is stable emotionally? And we are so far from where we wanted to be. So all of this is true in this moment in time.
So schools are safe, but you're still acknowledging the uptick in
Oh, yes,
discrimination?
absolutely. And anxiety.
So, there are now 3 announced candidates for county executive, including 2 of your council colleagues. Can we expect any announcement from you about your plans anytime soon? What's your thinking about timing?
My thinking is I've got a job to do right now. I'm trying to do that job. I am, as I shared last week, thinking about the county executive race, and when I get to a certain point in time, I will make a final decision and an announcement.
Would you be inclined to use public financing?
I will cross that bridge when I come to it.
Hey Roger, just to shift topics a little bit, do you know the status of the county executive's draft Vision Zero plan?
I do, it is just in the initial stages. It is a draft plan. It is a plan that is going before our pedestrian advisory committee. Maybe it did go last week on Thursday the 2nd. Had its first encounter with you, if you will, and so look forward to the feedback that they received and any modifications going forward, and then the committee will get briefed with respect to it. This is obviously very important. Continue to be hopeful that we'll have Hawk legislation passed in Annapolis that will bring these devices to the state of Maryland as they are in other communities. So it's things like that that I hope we will continue to make progress.
Wasn't this plan supposed to go to the council last year, like last October? This Vision Zero plan? It's now February, and the guy died in Silver Spring on Saturday.
Okay, it is what it is.
With the rhetoric and the sound bites that we hear from, say, the White House, what would you like to say to your members of your community about the anxiety they may be experiencing based on those things that we hear?
Well, again, that Montgomery County is a place where everyone is respected, where our diversity is our strength, where our values will not change, and where we will do what we must and can do to honor those values. There's obviously certain limits as to what we can do if ICE comes marching in. The federal government has federal powers that we cannot stop, but we can take care of collateral damage that takes place. And so that's been our principal focus internally, of making sure that what we have in place can step up in the case of families being torn apart. So I think we are all of one mind from Montgomery County that the president's new directives were an overreach and should have continued to prioritize criminals and people that commit violent acts, that that's the appropriate place to start and that we support that. But going beyond that, of taking people that have been here, that have U.S. citizens as children, and have been otherwise outstanding residents of our county, and picking them up is just not something that we want to be part of, and not something we want to see. But there are limits as to what we can do in that regard.
Brian, tonight, the city of Rockville is going to allow the public to comment on its proposed legislation to formalize its not having police enforce or ask immigration status at traffic stops. What are your thoughts on consistency throughout the Montgomery County community between the municipalities and the county?
I guess I would say the same thing that I said before in the beginning of this conversation. We believe that we do it the right way in Montgomery County. We commend it not only to our municipalities, but to the state as a whole. So if we're comfortable going to the state as a whole and saying, if you want to act in this realm, the way we do our business is really the right way. We don't ask immigration status. Okay? That's not what we do. And at the same time, we do cooperate when it comes to serious violent criminals.
What if, for some reason, an executive order were to be amended or added that directly addressed county communities and whether or not immigration status comes up in conversation between police and residents?
It is fortunate that we have a constitution. So under our constitution, the federal government cannot impose that responsibility on local governments.
But if they tried to, would you oppose it?
Well, if they tried to, we'd be in court in a nanosecond.
Concerning your testimony last week on the Trust Act, you said you didn't have an update, but did you at least get a sense of how the lawmakers received your amendments?
I don't, at 9 o'clock or 9:30 when I gave my testimony, I think all of them were hoping to be done. It was a long night. They do their business differently than we do ours. There's no set time, and I think for some of the controversial items, they like to put them at the end of the night so that there are perhaps less people there at that moment. But so there wasn't a lot of feedback. The sponsors of the legislation seemed pleased with our constructive engagement. And again, our hope by being constructively engaged is that we make it easier for there to be a statewide approach that is appropriate.
Were they eating pizza on the day by the time you got there?
They were done by the time I hadn't eaten any pizza. Really, it's a very weird thing because you don't know when the bill's going to be called up. And so since you don't know, it's not like you can go out and have dinner someplace because you know it's going to come up at 8:30. You're just hanging around waiting to see when it happens.
So Metro's starting its next Safe Track project. Do you have any, what have you heard from constituents with regard to reliability or their experience in general? Has anyone said anything recently?
Not recently, no. I mean, obviously, the Metro Board has got to struggle with how to reconcile both fares and service cuts, and people are trying real hard to avoid service cuts to the maximum extent possible. We have what's called the Grosvenor Turnback that had been proposed at one point, which would really hurt the red line in particular, and so we're hoping that that won't be part of the final plan. I'm hoping that service cuts generally will be minimized, and there may need to be some fare increases in order to fill the pot, but that's to be determined by the board. We weighed in, I obviously weighed in, urging that there not be either service cuts or fare increases if possible. But they got hard work to do.
Were you aware that Metro has been running trains on the red line every 30 minutes, starting at 7:30 for at least the past 2 weeks during the week?
I have not had a lot of constituents, so you asked me if I heard from my constituents with respect to it? No.
Were you aware that it was occurring?
No.
What do you think about Maryland being ranked the 8th best state in the country? This is the first time you're hearing that?
This is the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah, it was by U.S. News and World Report.
And the criteria was,
Oh, there's a lot of things: economy, government, crime.
well, I can certainly understand the government piece of it. But we do, we have a pretty sweet state. It's a pretty sweet state on so many different levels, so it doesn't surprise me.
So is it number one in your estimate?
I'm not gonna go there.
Are there any concerns that the humanistic approach that you've taken to, this issue of immigration, that there will be an increase of maybe people coming to Montgomery County for refuge?
I think our reputation is already in place with respect to how we treat our community. And we're obviously a very attractive place. If I were an immigrant and I was looking for a place where my kids could get a great education, where the economy was strong, and where I could get health care free, I'd say, oh my goodness, this is a great place, and with a pre-existing community. So I think that who we are is already well known, and we are proud of who we are.
Any sense on how much the county will allocate for public financing in the next budget?
I don't. I haven't seen what the county executive's figures are. I know that at one point there was a conversation about needing a total of $10 million for public financing. As to whether we reach that goal or not, I really don't know. It hasn't been, we haven't had the conversations internally either with respect to that. I'm sure that at least two of my colleagues will be pushing very hard.
Another question about Metro, so Metro recently, or last week, entered a consent decree with the Department of Justice after there were allegations that Metro discriminated against an applicant when they found out he had a disability. How does this, me sharing this with you, affect your impressions of Metro as it serves our community?
Well, like any large organization, mistakes are made. So I think you judge an organization by its leadership and its path going forward, and I feel like this organization has strong leadership and a positive path forward. And I am sure that every week you could ask me a question with respect to something that's happened on Metro. Okay? That is a given. And ladies and gentlemen, if we don't provide Metro with the financial resources it needs going forward, then shame on us. Okay? We will need dedicated funding, no matter what. And we'll need it, in my judgment, in next year. Okay? It has to happen next year.
Where do you think it's going to come from?
Well, it's going to come from, hopefully, Virginia, D.C., and Maryland together. We have to provide dedicated funding. It is the only system, major subway system in the United States of America that does not have dedicated funding. It must have it. And do we need governance reform as well? Absolutely, in my judgment. I've been one that has said repeatedly that I don't think elected officials should be serving on the Metro board, because I think it creates an inherent conflict of interest of taking care of short-term needs versus the long-term needs of the system. So those are legitimate conversations to have, but we need to come to closure on those conversations in time for Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia to pass dedicated funding next year.
So do you support or not support Congressman John Delaney's WMATA Improvement Act?
Well, I haven't had an opportunity to study it in any detail, but I think it fundamentally says almost the same thing, which is let's reform governance and let's provide the dollars. Okay? We need the federal government to step up and provide dollars. More dollars.
Roger, any thoughts on how important the redevelopment of the White Flint Mall property is to that growing area, realizing the goals of the White Flint Sector Plan? If that property sits vacant, how could it affect the county?
Well,
It sits as like a dirt patch with the Lord and Taylor store.
Lord and Taylor would probably beg to differ. There's no question that that parcel is an important part of the future of the White Flint community, of the Pike and Rose community, of whatever we call it, the Pike District. Is that what it's called? The Pike District, excuse me, I should know that. The Pike District. I actually have a shirt that has the Pike District on it. I remain confident that they will work through this, and we will have an appropriate development there that expands economic opportunity for our county. When we passed the White Flint plan, at one point we thought that it would generate something on the order of $7 billion in net economic benefits. Okay? I mean, it was a significant chunk of change. I continue to believe that's the case. You're beginning to see progress. You certainly see it in the federal realty sector, Pike and Rose. And I think you'll see it increasingly popping up throughout the rest of the White Flint area. But the Lerner property it's a big parcel. It's the single biggest parcel in the plan. So we're all looking forward to having this piece behind us and moving forward.
And the piece, you mean by the lawsuit?
Yes.
The lawsuit?
Whatever needs to happen there, get it done so that so that the learners can move forward. Anything else, gang? Thank you.